So we've been looking at ways at how we can minimise it, and how we can integrate this weed control within the highways, but still maintaining a safe highway. And we've used a number of alternatives, and probably most of the alternatives that are out there, if I'm honest. So we've looked at hot foam, acetic acid, manual cleaning and street cleansing, heat. But what we've also done recently as well in the last 2 or 3 years is looked at how we can work and tie up a little bit more with the districts, because for me, street cleansing and weed control go hand in hand. If you can remove the seed bed, then you will end up having less weeds. So let me just talk a little bit more about what we've done. So hot foam, we started doing hot foam trials back in 2010 in Thanet, and back in 2010 we were actually using an agricultural vehicle. It was actually at the forefront of when hot foam was being introduced. So we did spend several days running around Thanet with a John Deere tractor and a big tank on the back and foam going everywhere, and being followed around by lots of school kids going, what's going on? Since that, the manufacturer has evolved the treatment to what you see in the pictures there. So it goes on the back of a transit. They've also put one onto the back of some quads as well. So they've made it a little bit smaller. But essentially what it is hot water mixed with potato starch, agitated, and when you agitate it, it foams. And the reason you want the foam when you're treating the weeds is because the heat of the foam encapsulates the plant and keeps the heat on there longer, so the plant has more time to absorb that heat and then desiccate. And it effectively works by just breaking down the cell structure in the top growth. It is quite good. You can get instant results. Top right hand picture is a couple of days later after we've done some hot foaming. So it's very good for monitoring. You can say yes, it's been done. The only issue that we have with it, and what we found, is that it's quite labour intensive, because you've got to wander around there with a lance and a tanker of hot water. So obviously it's more costly. It is only treating the top growth. There's a little bit of systemic action with it, but it's only treating the top growth. So the weeds will grow. They will grow again because you're not killing that taproot. Because we're heating up water as well, there's quite a high carbon footprint, because that's running all day. That tank on the back of that transit. So the costs are quite high. The other thing as well to bear in mind as well when you're doing that hot foam on that top right picture, that is, it starts to look a little bit like wilted salad. When you're spraying herbicide, you get a much slower degeneration of the plant, so you don't end up with so much vegetative matter on the footway. When you're doing hot foam, it can be a little bit slippery, because all you're basically doing is it looks a bit like dead salad. So that's hot foam. Acetic acid we've looked at. Now, acetic acid is basically it's vinegar, really, and again that only treats the top growth of the weeds, so it just burns it off effectively because it's quite caustic. We've found there is a label warning on there for bees, so we've been looking at how we can reduce herbicide, because that's one of our aims in Plan B, to try and minimise the amount of herbicide that we do use within the highway. But acetic acid, although it is marketed as being all organic, and of course it is caustic, so if it has got a label warning. You have to put that in quite high volumes, because it only burns what it's touching. So you need to actually drench the plants. And of course, because it's acetic acid, there's a strong smell of salt and vinegar when you've put it on. So yeah, we have had a few people phone up and say what's happening on the pavement, because it smells like a chip shop. But yeah, it does work. But again, you have to repeat the application, because you're only treating the top growth, and then so the roots will regrow. Manual weeding and street cleansing. This is something that I think really we looked at this in the 2010 studies and in the 2019 studies, and to remove the seed bed, I think, is one of the most important things for us. So tying up with the street cleansing organisations in the districts, and making sure that we treat weeds when they're not going to be street cleansed the following day, is vital to us. And we've done some work with that. But this is certainly good. But again, to do that across the county and do manual weed cleaning without using herbicide is just very cost prohibitive. We've also found that we used a weed ripper in Thanet, which is that thing on the bottom left hand, that picture in the bottom left hand corner. And then you just trundle that along the pavements, and it rips the weeds out, and then a guy behind comes along and sweeps them all up. We found that with that, we were taking render off, particularly around Thanet, because it's a beast of a machine. So that's something else that's just to be mindful of. We tried direct heat. We've only tried this once, and that was in the Thanet weed trial back in 2010, for obvious reasons. But again, this is a thermal one, so we're travelling over the weed growth, and underneath that metal plate on the bottom left hand picture, there is a whole sort of ray of burners. And they don't actually touch the footpath, but they're just giving off infrared, which then desiccates the plant. So again, you're only treating the top growth. We did some studies back in 2010 and as part of the Thanet weed trial, and we looked at the carbon footprint. We had a local university looking at the carbon footprint with us, and they kind of assessed it, and there is a higher carbon footprint with this method simply because you're burning gas. One of the biggest issues that we had though was with the fire, and of course in a in a highway environment, you don't really know what is in the detritus at the back of the wall. And there could be litter, there could be all sorts of things in there. But we did have two instances of fire in Thanet. One, I think, is the bottom right, is a lavender bush, which clearly is, and it wasn't because the guy was underneath it with the burner. It was because something had caught fire, a couple of feet in front of it, and then it just wafted up and gone into it. Same with the hedge. So yeah, we kind of stopped doing that quite rapidly because from a health and safety point of view. And then finally, working with districts. Now, this is something we talked about previously, but over the last few years, we've been looking at how we can work with districts and actually remove some of the roads that we have got on our weed treatment so that we don't actually have to walk the roads and travel the roads to treat the weeds. And this works particularly well with some of the inner city sort of areas. And I think we've got a couple of towns that we're looking at, Sevenoaks, Tunbridge Wells, Dover and Folkestone, I think, are areas that we're looking at where we can remove some of the roads from our scheme. But it is, I do think, having that street cleansing working with in sort of synergy with the weed spraying is really and an integrated approach is probably the best way for us to minimise herbicide usage. I think this is getting close to the final slide. The final one really just climate change. Just want to have a quick chat about climate change and just. I think everyone's probably aware of the fact that we are getting a lot warmer, wetter winters, or we have at least over the last few years, and that means that a lot of the weeds that would normally die out now overwintering, and they're coming back in the spring, and they're causing us a lot of issues going through the year. The summers as well are also getting a lot wetter and warmer for us, which means that basically the weed pressure is increasing. So it's only going one way. One of the things that the bottom left hand picture is a picture of Alexander's, and although that isn't one that we generally find in hard surfaces, that's a success story from Thanet and Canterbury and all around the coast. That is causing us real issues in our rural verges because it actually grows and flowers before we have time to go out there and cut it, and that is happening because of the climate change that we're seeing and the fact that there's on the coast it's a little bit warmer, which means it grows a whole lot quicker. It's a Mediterranean plant at the base of it, so it likes those sort of conditions and it thrives, and that's causing us issues. But we're seeing similar sort of plants in the actual highway hard surfaces that are causing us problems. So this is a little bit of a summary. We haven't really found any alternatives yet that are as effective as herbicide, although we're looking at how we can integrate some of the street cleansing with the herbicides that we're using. The majority of the alternatives they're all more expensive and they all seem to be more labour intensive. And to put that into perspective, we're currently spending around 400 to 500k on the herbicide treatments, and if we didn't use herbicide, it would increase the cost by about 8 times. So you're looking at somewhere between £3.5 to £4 million for doing the county. We've also found as well across all of our trials, from 2010 to 2022, that a lot of the alternatives can have a higher carbon footprint, and they can be more damaging to the environment. In the case of acetic acid, when they actually have got a B warning on there. And the best solution that we have found is really just for integrated weed control and trying to tie up with street cleansing and to remove that seed bed and seed bank at source so that you have less weeds. We've also, when we get new designs and new developments come through, we're also looking at how we can incorporate more robust weed surfaces within those, so that we don't have a weed issue in the future, because weeds, the amount of weeds that you've got on your footpath are associated with this with the length of cracks effectively. So if you put lots of paving down, you're going to have a lot more weeds because there's more cracks and more opportunities for weeds to thrive. Similarly, if you put block paving down, so there's ways and means for us to try and design out some of these issues with weeds. And I think that's it, Carol.
Thank you very much for that, Robin. So I'll pass straight over to Alison Hughes as our Compliance and Performance Manager. She's going to talk about Streetworks coordination, but Robin will be here to take any questions at the end of this session. Thank you. Alison.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, good afternoon all. I'm just trying to load my presentation. Oh, that's not worked, has it?
Yes, it has.
Oh, can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. One moment, I'm just going to move that over there. All right, yes, good afternoon all. I'm Alison Hughes. I am the Compliance and Performance Manager for the Streetworks teams here in Kent. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about the work of the Streetworks team, about how we coordinate works on the network and the impact, and I'm going to touch a little bit as well on the inspection regime that we carry out to monitor streetworks. So core function of the teams here is to coordinate all the works that we see on the network, and I'm sure you're all aware there's a lot of them. And we also have a duty to go out and inspect those works as well. So all of the work that we do is underpinned by the New Road and Streetworks Act from 1991. It sets out quite clear roles and responsibilities for both us as a highway authority and for utility companies. So it's a statutory code that we all work to. The primary objectives of the code is to ensure that we're minimising disruption as much as we can. Safety is a key part of it as well, and that's both for the people carrying out the work as well as the general public. We have to make sure that we're monitoring the quality of the workmanship, and there's quite clear guidelines on how that work should be carried out on the network, and coordination, so facilitating that coordination between the utilities and authorities conducting the works. And it's that coordination function that sort of pretty much underpins everything that the Streetworks team are doing. It's the most important aspect really of that Streetworks legislation. So the teams here in Kent, we're quite a large team because we're so busy. We have 4 Streetworks teams across the county. We have East Central, West Central. Each team is responsible for 3 districts. And we also have a compliance and performance team, which I manage, and we look after all of the systems, all of the data, the finance sits under me, and I have some compliance inspectors as well. So on the right hand side there, just a typical structure of one of our Streetworks teams. So heads up by a manager. We have senior coordinators, area coordinators. We have dedicated broadband coordinators as well because of the increase in that area of work that we're seeing. We also have senior Streetworks inspectors. Each district has its own area inspector as well. Each team has a broadband inspector, so they'll work across the 3 districts within their team. And as of this year, we also now have some dedicated road closure inspectors, and I'll come on a little bit later about some of the work that they're doing. And then to help support the teams, we have technical support officers as well, and a temporary traffic regulation order officer. It's a bit of a mouthful, who writes all of our legal traffic orders as well to enable us to be able to close roads legally. So how do we coordinate? We have a system since 2020 called Street Manager. This is a DFT-owned system. It's a mandatory system that all highway authorities in England have to use, and all utility companies have to use. So when a works promoter needs to work on the network, they have to submit a permit via Street Manager. So they put it in on their system, and it lands up on ours, and we look at that permit, and we will look to coordinate that. So the aim of Street Manager, I guess, is for us to have all the information we need to be able to do that coordination. But I guess the hardest thing is balancing the rights of utility companies, because they do have a right to access, maintain and replace their plant. As a highway authority, we're not in a position to say you can't do that. So it's working with them to find the best time for them to do that. so that the rights of road users can be met as well, because obviously they expect the minimum of disruption from those works. It's not our responsibility to prevent the disruption. We get a lot of inquiries coming in saying, why did you allow this to happen? We can't stop that. It's inevitable. If we set up a set of temporary traffic lights on a road, or there's a road closure, it will cause disruption. But it is our duty to coordinate those works. And the aim of that coordination is to minimise the disruption as best as possible. Not always easy, because a high volume of emergency works, which again we'll touch on in a second. So when these permits come in, the area coordinators will assess the permits for impact. They will look at things like whether or not it clashes with other works. Is there the ability to do some collaborative working? And we do try to encourage that as much as possible. It's not so easy with short-term works, but where we've got larger big projects, we will always try and get multiple promoters working within the same traffic management if we can. Where it's not possible to do that, then permits will get refused if the road space isn't available. We can add conditions onto permits. So we might ask the promoter to manually control their temporary lights. We might ask them to use smart lights, which is some new technology that's coming in that uses radar technology to manage traffic flows at temporary traffic lights. We may ask for extended working hours, off-peak working, weekend working, overnight working. There's various different conditions that we can put onto permits to help reduce the impact of those works, particularly on our traffic sensitive network. For larger projects, then our coordinators might request site meetings with the works promoter, just to look at exactly what they've got to do, look at the land, how it lies. Is there a better way of doing this? And we do that quite regularly again for some of the larger projects that happen on the network. Depending on the duration of works, we get different notice periods for our permits. So for minor works, for example, which is anything with a duration up to 3 days, the utility only has to give us 3 days notice of those works. So because of the volumes, it's quite a quick turnover for us to have to look and assess and grant those permits. You can see there in 23-24, we've received nearly 115,000 applications, and of those, over 33,000 of those were for immediate works. And I've just put a little table on the left there. I mean, you can see nearly 50,000 of those 114 works were actually works carried out by the Highway Authority, by Kent, and that's for all of our service areas. Closely followed by the water companies. Most of their work tends to be emergency, unfortunately, and that's due to their ageing infrastructure. And you can see on there we've got the likes of Openreach, Virgin Media, Atomnia, Truly, City Fibre, which are all of our broadband companies, and we're fully expecting to see those numbers of permits from them ramping up over the coming sort of months and years, because there's a few large projects coming our way. So emergency works, as I said, we receive a very high volume of emergency works. Water leaks, gas leaks, lost power, as well as our own highway maintenance works for potholes and things like that. And the very nature of these works don't give us the opportunity to be able to coordinate. They do cause the teams a lot of stress. They put a lot of pressure on the teams. We're quite often having to juggle works around because of clashes. We can't always remove that clash, because if there's a gas escape in progress and then we get a water leak coming in, they're both urgent works. So, but a lot of work will go on to try and get diversions symbolised where road closures are required. They do cause the most disruption. Emergency works, I think, are the ones that I can honestly say generate most of the customer inquiries that do come into the streetworks teams to deal with. So it's a challenge. So I've just put here, this is just like a 2-week view of all in progress works and proposed works in the sort of central Maidstone area. It's just a snapshot to give you an idea of the volume that we are dealing with. And this snapshot doesn't include any emergency works that might come in within this geographical area over the next 2 weeks. Because with emergency works, they don't have to tell us, as I said, until after the works have been completed. So as well as processing permits, the Streetworks team will carry out sample inspections of work sites. We live in a world now where we have what we call performance-based inspections. These have only been in place for about 18 months now. And this gives us the ability to do more inspections on poorer performance. So historically, we used to inspect 30% of a utilities works. But now, if in any one quarter, if their failure rate is greater than 15%, then the following quarter we can do 5% more inspections. So it'll be 35% of their works that we will inspect. And we charge for those. Each of those inspections, we recharge back to the utility company. And there's no limit on that. So if in the following quarter they have another 15% failure rate, then we'll do 40% inspections. And it will go up to a maximum of 100%, although I don't think we have the resource to do that. But we do find that most utilities, if they go up into those higher levels, they do put things in place to address that performance, to bring it down, and they can go down to a minimum of 20%. So if their performance is really, really good, then we take off 5% to a minimum of 20. And we do have some of our utilities that are only running on 20%. So each district in Kent has its own area inspector. There is just one area inspector per district. So it's a big area for these guys to cover. We do have 4 dedicated broadband inspectors as well, and that's to monitor the increase of that type of work. And as I said earlier, from this year, we've got 4 dedicated road closure inspectors, and that's to help drive compliance in this area because it's a really hot topic at the moment. So there's 3 types of inspections that we will carry out. There's a in progress when the site is live, what we call a Cat B inspection. That's after the works are finished, and we will go to check that the site has been cleared properly and the road has been reinstated to the required standard. And then what we call a Cat C, and that's within 3 months of the expiry of the guarantee period, which is usually 2 years. So we'll go out sort of a couple of months before that's due to expire, just to make sure that the road is holding up. And it's not failing. And if it is, we'll issue a defect and they will have to come back and redo that work. So the specification for the reinstatement of openings in the highway, or SROH as we refer to it in the business, is a statutory code of practice that sets out how roads must be reinstated. It's a science. It's about a 270-page document. It can be quite complex. But it does apply to all undertakers reinstating the highway, and it sets out the requirements for the types of materials that should be used, the standard of workmanship, the performance levels that should be there. There's a little bit on another slide exactly what we're looking at when we go out and about. So yeah, on our live inspections, our inspectors will check that they've signed and guarded their sites in accordance with a safety code of practice that we have to comply with. And I think the key with any site when we look at it is, does the road user know what is expected of them? So as they're approaching that site, is it clear what they have to do? And particularly with pedestrians, it's very key that we're looking after our pedestrians, especially vulnerable, partially sighted. So that's one of the key things that our inspectors are looking at when they go out to site. We make sure that every site has got an information board. That is a requirement that they have to have, and there has to be a copy of their permit number on that board. That's so if there's an issue with that site out of hours or overnight or at weekends, either us or the police or the general public know who to contact to get that site made safe. And inspectors will also ensure that the work's being carried out in accordance with their permit conditions as well. And if they're not, we will issue them with a fixed penalty notice. So, yeah, so with regards to the reinstatement, as I said, we will look at all of the excavations in accordance with the SROH. We will look at things like specific layer depths, compaction. We're ensuring that the correct backfill materials are being used. It's not uncommon to find excavated material just being thrown back into the hole, which is contaminated, which is not great for us. They'll look for issues such as edge depression, surface depression, crowning, etc. And also one of the other key things that we do look at as well is making sure that on that excavation, on the vertical sides of any excavation, that edge sealant has been used, because that sort of creates an adhesive bond to the existing surface. And if that's not there, that's when we get water egress, and we all know what happens after that. We have more potholes to fill. So just touching a little bit on road closures here, it's a very hot topic at the moment. We have seen the demand in services, the rollout of broadband, increased developments has massively inflated the number of closures that we've had over the last few years. We don't see it getting any better, unfortunately. The recent BD UK project is just about to roll out, and that's to reach all of the rural communities. So the very nature of the network that we're trying to roll that broadband out into it results in more rural closures. So not great. We get a lot of requests for immediate and urgent closures, and they are probably what's putting most of the pressure on the Streetworks team. But whilst it is a frustration, we do need to bear in mind that most of the works that are happening out there are a request for service by the public. People want better broadband, they've got poor pressure, they need a new service, so they are, and their customers are our customers, so we have to sort of bear that in mind when we're looking at these works. And as I said earlier, we do now have dedicated road closure inspectors to audit these closures, so they're doing audits over and above the sample inspections that we carry out, and the aim there is to improve the performance in that area, because we do have some that aren't doing as well as others with their closures. So we are challenging their working methodology. We're looking to try and drive down those durations. So if we can see the works are completed and the road is still shut, then we'll be straight onto that utility and get them to pull that closure in. Or if the site has been pre-laid and nobody's on site starting the work, which is the biggest frustration, we're dealing with those things. And we'll have the data and the information we need to take to our quarterly performance meetings and to highlight that with those promoters. So when things go wrong, so within legislation, us as a highway authority, we do have specific powers to be able to levy fines and charges against utilities, and we do that. So we charge for permits, we charge for the road closures, so all of those things come with an administration fee. But on top of that, we can issue penalties, so breach of permit conditions if they're not manually controlling their lights, for example, or if they're not working the extended hours, we will submit a fixed penalty notice. Unsafe sites. So if we find a high risk unsafe site, we will issue a defect notification, and that they are then required to make that site safe within 2 hours, or if it's extremely dangerous, we will stop the works. We've asked them to pull that site in and stop the works. Overrunning works, we can issue daily fines for that. And that's where the actual physical works are overrunning, or even if they leave behind signage or equipment, they can get a daily charge for leaving that behind. So if ever you find that in any of your parishes, please do report it. We will investigate it, and we will issue the appropriate fines. And also defective workmanship. So where they don't reinstate the road correctly, if that's highlighted we do our sample inspections, but we can't pick up every single excavation that's out there. Where we do, we will issue a defect notice that comes with a defect charge. But again, if you can see that there's been a reinstatement done, then it doesn't look like it's been done to a good standard. If that's reported to us, we will go out and look at that. And if it's a defect, then we will issue that against the relevant works promoter. So just lastly, we do actually work very closely with the utilities. They do cause us some pain, but we try to have positive working relationships with them. So we have what we call our Kent Hawk meeting, which is a Kent Highway Authority and Utilities Committee. We meet quarterly with all of the utilities that work within Kent, and we discuss performance. We have quarterly reports. We might discuss changes in legislation. We look at coring results, because we core their works as well. And that meeting is in conjunction with our coordination meeting, and that's where we'll look at major projects that are coming up on the network and see if there's any opportunity for collaboration. I also represent KCC at the South East Hawk, also the South East Joint Authorities Group, the Permit Authority Group, and we have quarterly performance meetings with all of our works promoters here in Kent. So there is lots of communications going on, and all of these regional meetings, they all feed into national Hawk and National Jug as well, and those bodies sort of feed back into DFT and central government with issues that are raised, and we sort of just discuss changes in legislation, best practice documents, how we can improve things, performance issues. So there's a lot going on in the background to try and improve what we do with the works that, that's going on out on the network. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of the teams. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alison. Very comprehensive. So we have had some questions in the chat. They've all been answered apart from two. One of them was just really a comment. But thank you very much to the team of officers who've been working behind the scenes and answering all the questions in the chat. I've just got maybe a couple of new ones. Adrian Waters. Adrian, would you like to raise your hand and we can take your question? Okay, are you able to unmute, Adrian? Okay, Robin, I don't know if you can see. Oh, sorry, Alison, I don't know if you can see the question.
Yes, I can.
Right.
Yeah, so it wasn't that 20% foul. It's just that we only inspect 20% of their work. So there's a benchmark of 30%. So we are in legislation, we are allowed to do sample inspections on 30% of the utilities works and charge them for those inspections. That doesn't mean that those 30% are failing. That's just the threshold. If within any one quarter they fail, that their failure rate is greater than 15%, then the following quarter we can inspect 35% of their works. The 20% is the minimum amount that we can inspect. So if their failure rate is less than 10% in any one quarter, then that would go down to 25% and then down to 20%, but it would never go down to zero. With any promoter working out on our network, we will always inspect a minimum of 20% of their works. So it's not that 20% are failing. I would say the average failure rate of utility companies is probably between about 8 and 12%, 8 and 14%. We do have some of our utilities that are on the minimum inspection of 20% because their sites generally are very safe and we have very few defects that we find on their reinstatements. Hope that clarifies that.
Thank you, Alison. There's another question from Wingham Parish Clerk. How do you decide which utility works to inspect?
So it's sample inspections, so they're random sample inspections. So the street manager randomly generates them for us. So we don't, it's not that we do a targeted approach. It's not to say we don't do a targeted approach. On some works we do, like with our road closures and our broadband works, that they are targeted. But with our normal day-to-day inspections that our district inspectors are, they are just random sample inspections that are auto-generated out of street manager. If we get a customer inquiry that comes through that has concerns about a specific set of works, then obviously we'll go out and deal with that over and above those sample inspections.
Good. All right, Alison, thank you very much for that. And thank you everyone for your presentations. We have run slightly over time, so I'd just like to hand over to Haruna, who's going to do some concluding comments. Haruna, please.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you, everybody. I just want to say what a great morning it's been. Thank you all very, very much for taking the time and spending it with us and enabling our officers to share what we've been doing and engaging and asking very, very good questions. So thank you very, very much. As Carol has said, any questions, post them in the chat function and we will get back to you, and via Calc, we'll work with Charmaine. And also just to remind you of the in-person event on the 20th of November in Maidstone. If anybody would like to come along again and hear exactly what we've shared with you again, you're most welcome, but please obviously do register with the team so we know that how many people will be coming. Just to say, it is the first in-person seminar we've had since the pandemic, so we're really excited about being able to see people and parish members in person and having that opportunity to network. And then just that leaves just sort of final point from me. Presentations from the parish seminars will be shared via Calc after the November event. And a huge thank you to my team who've taken a lot of time and effort to put the presentations together and have answered the questions. And thank you for your time. I do see some questions, some hands have gone up. So Carol, do we want to take some questions now? Do we have time? I'm happy to take them.
We have gone over time, but if I can see David Roby has his hands up. I think, Jim, we may have answered your question, and I think Sarah, we've answered your question in the chat, but I don't know, if you'd like to take David's question, if he's able to unmute
Yeah,
himself.
absolutely. I'll probably link it. David's probably going to say something about utilities, aren't you, David? Can he unmute, I suppose, is the question.
He should be able to. Can you make him a presenter? Oh,
thank you. I didn't mean to put my hand up. So that's disappointing for you. So it's a mistake. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay. We have got a couple of other questions in the chat, but we're happy to get back to people on those. So Joe Sullivan's asked, how did she find out who the highway steward is for the area? And we've also got something about devolving, but we're happy to we can get back to those specific questions, Haruna.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. I see Val's hand up. Val, did you have anything you wanted to come in on?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, I'm on an iPad and I can't see the chat and I can't put anything in the chat. So I do apologise. I just want to say thank you. What an excellent presentation. And I think you might have answered my question. I think you said you're going to send it to Calc to share, because it's been so informative and would answer so many questions that other parish councillors and even residents have. So just to thank everybody for their time today, I have found it extremely useful. So thank you.
Thank you, Val, and thank you for saying that, because it's not often that we get thank you. So thank you, really appreciate that. So again, huge thanks to the team, huge thanks to you all. Let's keep working together. I think, you know, this is obviously continues the great relationship we've got, and a huge thanks to Charmaine as well as leading sort of Calc and taking us through the challenging times that we have coming up. Hopefully see some of you on the 20th, but again, thank you for your time and see you soon.
Thank you.